questions, and let's...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Paul Blomfield.
Sheffield Young Carers is a group supporting inspirational young people who balance all the normal challenges of their young lives with the demands of caring for a parent or a sibling, often with acute needs. People like John, who's been caring for his mother with fibromyalgia from the age of 10, or Phoebe, who's been supporting her father with mental health problems from the age of 8. They have some practical ideas about what the government could do to make their lives easier. Would the Prime Minister agree to meet them and hear their proposals?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that I think it's absolutely right that he raises this issue. There are many young people who are caring for their parents, sometimes caring for their other siblings as well, and all too often going unseen and unheard. And certainly one of the things that we're doing as a government is trying to ensure that we do see more opportunities, more ability to identify, to assess young carers and their families and to support them and to make the rights of young carers clearer. And I know that the Department of Health and Social Care is intending to publish a plan setting out our targeted cross-government action on this area, but I'd be happy to meet with a group of young carers to hear directly from them.
Mr. Ronald J. Wardener.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I believe in a global Britain and I want us to trade freely with the world. So can my right honourable friend explain the difference between a customs union and a customs arrangement? There seems to be some confusion.
Well, can I say to my honourable friend that he's absolutely right. We want to be able to have a good trading relationships with the European Union, but we also want to be able to negotiate trade deals around the rest of the world with an independent trade policy. And I was rather confused because I heard a speech earlier in the week, which I believe was given by the Labour leader on this subject, where he said that he wanted Labour to negotiate a new comprehensive customs union. That would mean we couldn't do our own trade deals and actually would betray the vote of the British people. And in about the next sentence, he said he wanted a customs arrangement, meaning we could negotiate our new trade deals. Well, that's the government's position. So what does he want to do? Let down the country or agree with the government?
Jeremy Corbyn.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. I hope the whole House will join me in passing our deepest condolences to the families of the people who died and those injured in the explosion in Leicester, in the constituency of my friend, the member for Leicester West. Could we say thank you to all the emergency services and hospital staff who worked to save lives in that terrible situation? Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister emerged from her Chequers away day to promise a Brexit of ambitious managed divergence. Could she tell the country what on earth ambitious managed divergence will mean in practice?
Can I first of all say to the right honourable gentleman that I join him, and I'm sure the whole House, in expressing our condolences to the family and friends of those who lost their lives in the explosion in Leicester. And I also agree with him that we should commend the activities and the work of the emergency services, who day in and day out do so much for all of us, but in circumstances like that really showed the great job that they do in dealing with that issue. Now, he asks me about the government's position on the European Union. Well, it's very simple. We want to deliver on the road to the British people. That means that we will bring back control of our laws, our borders and our money. Now, of course, that's in direct contrast with the Labour Party's position, who want to be in a customs union, have free movement and pay whatever it takes to the EU. That would mean giving away control of our laws, our borders and our money, and that would be a betrayal of the British people.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, I understand the Prime Minister is going to make a speech about this on Friday, but I hope she will address the concerns of 94% of small and medium-sized businesses who say the government is ignoring their concerns about how we leave the EU. But who does she think might be better at identifying the business opportunities of the future? The Confederation of British Industry, the Engineering Employers Federation and the Institute of Directors, or the International Trade Secretary?
Well, the right honourable gentleman talks about the views of business and talks about the views of small business. Can I just refer him to what the Federation of Small Businesses has said about our position? The UK small business community sees the potential wins of an independent UK global trade policy. We want trade kept as easy as possible with the EU27. That's our position. Small businesses are pushing to export to new growth areas: the US, English-speaking nations, emerging economies, and the Commonwealth. A good trading relationship with the European Union and free trade deals around the rest of the world under an independent sovereign nation.
Corbyn!
Mr. Speaker, the International Trade Secretary says that business organisations and TUC have got it all wrong, that they don't know best how to prosper or grasp opportunities. I just put it gently to her. It might be they've got more of a clue than he has about the interests of business, jobs and living standards. Last week, the Health Secretary, and it's wonderful to see him here today, I assume he was speaking on behalf of the government when he said there will be areas and sectors of industry where we agree to align our regulations. He seems to know the answer. So can the Prime Minister enlighten the rest of us as to which sectors of the government wants to remain aligned and which they plan to diverge?
Well, first of all, the right honourable gentleman himself has said that I'm going to be making a speech on these issues later this week. So he could just calm down. I've already set out in some detail the position that the government is taking. I will elaborate on that further this week. What we want to ensure is that across a variety of sectors, the goods sector, but also looking at issues like financial services, which are such a crucial part of our economy, that we get the relationship that means that we are able to ensure that we can see that trade going across the borders between the United Kingdom and the remaining EU27 members, and that we have no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, and we're absolutely committed to delivering on that. But he talks about people not having a clue. I'll tell him who hasn't got a clue about business and jobs. That's a Labour Party that wants to borrow $500 billion and bankrupt Britain.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Mr. Speaker, the endless round of after-dinner speeches by the Prime Minister on Europe doesn't really substitute for negotiations as to what is actually going to result from these negotiations altogether. One of the sectors already suffering very badly is that of health and social care. It is highly reliant, Mr. Speaker, on migrant workers. We depend on them for our health and the care of those that need it. Isn't the Prime Minister just a little bit concerned that European Union workers with vital skills are leaving Britain in unprecedented numbers now?
As the right honourable gentleman might have noticed from the last set of immigration figures, we actually still see more people coming into the UK from the European Union than are leaving the UK going back to the European Union. But we do have a care about the number of nurses and GPs that we have in the NHS. That's why we have set the highest levels of training, numbers of people in training for both nurses and GPs. It's why we've significantly increased the opportunities, not just for people who are coming from the European Union to work in our National Health Service, but actually for those people here in this country who want to work in our NHS to get those training places and do the excellent job that we know they will do for patients in our National Health Service.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Mr. Speaker, from a government that's cut the nurse training bursary, that doesn't seem to understand it takes 8 years to train a doctor, and completely oblivious, apparently, to the fact that there are 100,000 vacancies in the NHS now, I suggest some members get a life and go and visit a hospital and see just how hard those people work in order to cover for the vacancies that are there. Surely we need to give immediate, real assurance to EU nationals they have a future in this country. Mr. Speaker, just 3 months ago, the Foreign Secretary told the House with regard to Northern Ireland, and I quote, "There can be no hard border. That would be unthinkable." That's what he said. Yet, in a leaked letter to the Prime Minister, he wrote, "Even if a hard border is reintroduced, we would expect to see 95% plus of goods pass." He's shouting at the moment. He's obviously mixing up the border with the Camden-Islington border. So, Mr. Speaker, can the Prime Minister confirm that she will not renege on commitments made in Phase 1 to keep an open border in Ireland?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, he actually raised 3 different issues in that question, so I'll address all of them. He raised the issue of rights for European Union nationals, and of course key part of the December agreement, the December joint report that we agreed with the European Union, was about the rights of EU citizens living here in the United Kingdom and the rights of United Kingdom citizens living in the EU 27. That was an important thing to have agreed at an early stage in the negotiations. We said we'd do it, and we did just that. He talks about the number of nurses. Of course, there are now 13,900 more nurses on our wards than there were under Labour. And just while he's talking about the number of years that it takes to train doctors, he said it takes 8 years to train a doctor. Well, if he's worried about the number of doctors there are now, 8 years ago it was a Labour government that was deciding the number of doctors that were going to be trained. So he can talk about that. And then... And just finally, because he referred to the position on Northern Ireland, the Foreign Secretary and I are absolutely committed to ensuring that we deliver on no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. That's the position of the UK government. It's the position of the parties in Northern Ireland. It's the position of the Irish government, and it was what we agreed in the December agreement of that joint report. We are all committed to ensuring there is no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, if that is the case, then why is the Foreign Secretary in private correspondence with the Prime Minister about doing just the opposite of that which was agreed in Phase 1? Mr. Speaker, this is a government in disarray. Every time the Cabinet meets, all we get is even more bizarre sound bites. Remember when we had Brexit means Brexit? Then we had red, white and blue Brexit, which presumably appealed to the members opposite. Then we had liberal Brexit, and now we have ambitious managed divergence. The government is so divided, the Prime Minister is incapable of delivering a coherent and decisive plan for Brexit. So when is she going to put the country's interests before the outsized egos of her own cabinet?
Say to the right honourable gentleman, my priorities are the priorities of the British people. Yes, we're going to get Brexit right and deliver a good Brexit deal for them. But we're also building the homes that the country needs so people can own their own home. We're raising standards in our schools so our kids all get a good education. We're protecting the environment for future generations. That's a Conservative government delivering on people's priorities and giving them optimism and hope for the future, as opposed to a Labour Party that would bankrupt Britain, betray voters and drag this country down.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
No, Mr. Clark, you're getting overexcited. I was calling Chris Davis, the honourable gentleman behind you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I start by wishing you, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister, and indeed the whole House, a very happy St. David's Day for tomorrow. can I thank my right honourable friend for taking representatives of River Simple, a leader in the field of hydrogen-powered automotives and based, of course, in Brecon and Radnorshire, on her recent successful trade visit to China. What is the government planning to do to help regional SMEs to make the most of potential trade opportunities with emerging markets once we leave the EU?
Say to my honourable friend that I was very happy to take a large business delegation with me on the trip to China, including representatives of River Simple. It was a very good trip, very positive in terms of the connections and the deals that were agreed as a result of that trip. I can assure him that the Department for International Trade is working hard to support SMEs across the UK to help connect exporters with buyers around the world. And, of course, companies in the UK can access our overseas network and our programme of international events. And I would also commend the work of colleagues around the House who are trade envoys, who are working very, including my honourable friend, the member for Gloucester, who is our trade envoy for China and who also accompanied me on that trip. And I'm pleased to say that last year, UK Export Finance provided £3 billion in support, helping 221 UK companies selling to 63 countries. 79% of those companies were SMEs.
In Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 2012, the Prime Minister talked about, and I quote, a future in which Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and England continue to flourish side by side as equal partners. Does the Prime Minister still stand by this?
Of course, I continue to stand by wanting to ensure that all parts of the United Kingdom continue to flourish. I think the best way of doing that is ensuring all parts of the United Kingdom remain in the United Kingdom.
Ian Blackford.
Well, of course, Mr. Speaker, the emphasis was on equal. And we're faced with the situation that there's a power grab by Westminster. And it's no surprise that the Scottish and Welsh governments are putting forward continuity bills to stop the power grab by Westminster. Mr. Speaker, the Foreign Secretary's leaked letter on the Irish border shows he can't get to grips with one of the most fundamental issues of Brexit. Yeah, right. The Foreign Secretary compared crossing the Irish border to going between Camden and Westminster. Frankly, you could not make this stuff up. This is a UK government that is prepared to put at jeopardy the Good Friday Agreement.
Right.
Does the Prime Minister agree with our bumbling Foreign Secretary who is making the United Kingdom a laughingstock?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, first of all, this government is absolutely committed to the Belfast Agreement. Indeed, we made sure that that commitment was included in the joint report that we agreed with the European Union last December. So that commitment to the Belfast Agreement stands, and we're committed to the Belfast Agreement and the institutions under the Belfast Agreement. He refers to this issue of devolved powers, which are coming back from the European Union. That was his reference. We have also given an absolute commitment to amending Clause 11, and that commitment remains unchanged. My right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, has recently met with representatives of devolved administrations. He acknowledged he put forward a further proposal for them, which ensured that more powers are directly devolved to the Scottish and Welsh governments and in due course with the Northern Ireland Executive. And it was acknowledged that that was a significant step forward. And I have to say to the right honourable gentleman, he talks about the continuity bills. Well, the proposals being put forward are unnecessary. It would be rather more helpful if he was to concentrate on reaching an agreement in relation to the withdrawal agreement, because we want to ensure more powers are devolved to the devolved administrations. That's what we're going to deliver.
Tim Lawton.
Mr. Speaker, back in the real world, last year Network Rail paid out £181 million in compensation to train operating companies for cancellations and delays, yet only £74 million of that was passed on to passengers. Why should train operators benefit financially from failure to deliver a decent service when it's the passengers who suffer the aggro inconvenience and cost? And what is she planning to do to make sure the money goes to the rightful place, the passenger?
Can I say to my honourable friend that yes, he's right that rail operators are compensated. They're compensated when there's disruption on the tracks run by Network Rail. So it's a compensation for something that has happened not as a result of their doing, but actually as a result of something that Network Rail is doing. Yes, we do ensure that there is also compensation available to those who suffer from the disruption, to the passengers who suffer from the disruption. I'm pleased to say that automatic payments are available from many rail operators, but not everybody can be automatically refunded. But we are operating a delay replay scheme, which means that everyone, regardless of their ticket type, can have access to the compensation that they deserve. We want to ensure that passengers do get the compensation that they deserve when their journeys are disrupted.
David Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask the Prime Minister to reinforce her earlier comments, given the imminent publication from the EU of draft legal text arising from December's joint report. Will the Prime Minister confirm that she will never agree to any trade borders between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom?
Well, can I say to the honourable gentleman that we continue to stand behind all of the commitments that we made in December, and my negotiating team will work with the Commission to agree how they should be translated into legal form in the withdrawal agreement. But he's right, the draft legal text the Commission have published would, if implemented, undermine the UK common market and threaten constitutional integrity of the UK by creating a customs and regulatory border down the Irish Sea. And no UK Prime Minister could ever agree to it. I will be making it crystal clear to President Juncker and others that we will never do so. We are committed to ensuring that we see no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, but the December text also made clear that there should continue to be trade between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom, as there is today.
Mr. Simon Clarke.
Unemployment has fallen faster in the North East than anywhere else in our country. Tremendous news. The next step to put rocket boosters under the economy on Teesside would be to create a free port at Teesport. Will my right honourable friend look seriously at this idea, which has great support from Tees Valley Mayor Ben Houchen and local business leaders?
Can I say to my honourable friend that when I visited Ben Houchen and visited Teesport, this was one of the proposals that they did put to me. I'm very happy to join with him in welcoming the fall in unemployment that we've seen in the North East, and there are a number of ways in which we are providing and ensuring that we see that economic growth continuing in the North East, and that's why we're investing £126 million through the Tees Valley local growth deal. I know my right honourable friend the Chancellor has confirmed recently we do remain open to ideas that could drive growth and provide benefits to the UK and its people, and so we'll keep all these options under consideration.
Mike Amesbury.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Agents from the Shell gas company, INEOS, recently posted a pre-named...
It's a big day in Westminster. We're just going to dip away from Prime Minister's questions. We've had that